What is the best revenge you've ever gotten on someone? Story 1. When I was a teenager, my family stayed at a campground for the summer. There were a bunch of kids that hung out, about 15 of us, and it was almost a 50-50 split between boys and girls, which led to some very eye-opening and pleasing summers. But I digress. So the average age of the guys was 15. We were full of testosterone, and while the kids were running around swimming and trying not to get caught doing anything else, the adults were partying. I mean, just getting ripped. A couple of the guys that were there would get absolutely hammered and mess with us kids. Not in a hurtful way, but ball-busting type stuff. So we'd sling insults back and forth, and then one day it escalated. I can't remember exactly, but I want to say they threw eggs at one of us. Oh, did I forget to say that these two guys each weighed about 400 pounds? It was all gut, literally. These guys drank like fish their entire lives. One passed away way before he was 40. So when you're that big and immobile, throwing eggs at kids that play baseball almost year-round, not a good idea. So we got them back. Anyways, little revenge pranks go back and forth like this for a few weeks, until we dropped the proverbial dong prank hammer on them. So even though we were in our younger teens, one of our friends looked 20. So we agreed that we would buy a gay porno magazine. So a bunch of 15-year-old kids huddled around the table, trying not to look at all the dongs laid out in the magazine in front of us. Needless to say, there was a lot of awkward laughing. We eventually cut out all the pictures, and we had about 40, I'm guessing. Don't remember the exact number. So as these two guys passed out from various alcohol and drug consumption, we broke in through their porch. They had a locked door, but they had screens on the outside windows, so we lifted the staples out, and two of us climbed in and proceeded to tiptoe around and tape up these scandalous pictures everywhere. On the walls, the TV, in one of the bedrooms, taped behind milk cartons, in the case of beer, literally everywhere. This was done on purpose, of course, because while we wanted them to see the obvious ones, we wanted them 2 weeks from that point to reach for something or look for something and look up, and whammy, rock-hard skin flute right in their face. So we stayed up all night to wait for their reaction. And of course, it was priceless. First, you hear the morning fart, the groans and stretching as they both start moving around, the stumbling, hungover, half-dead walk of two 400-pound men and their names changed. Bob, holy shoot, there's dorks everywhere! A plethora of swear words. You hear the paper being ripped off, more swear words. Now, these are just the visible ones. I heard the fridge open, heard one of them grab something, then I hear, Steve, it looks like you're chugging that guy's crank. An extreme close-up picture of a peen was taped onto the milk carton. They actually found pictures for another week or so. But the crowning achievement was when they had a bunch of family over, parents and friends, and as Bob lifted the grill cover to get it started, an 8x11 picture of a gigantic naked dude holding his junk like Thor's hammer floated out into the air. It moved around a little before finally settling onto the picnic table. Smack dab in front of all the family and friends in attendance. It was epic. So that's my greatest revenge story, I guess. I feel like there's an ending we aren't hearing, where the guys stopped throwing eggs after that and started throwing rocks. I don't want to have to repeat this all throughout the video, so I'll just warn anyone taking notes right now that revenge almost always begets more revenge. That said, this is pretty clever. If you put aside the laws that were broken, and the fact that uninvolved family members got inadvertently roped into it, not to mention the fact that putting it where family could run into it means these pictures could have easily been exposed to a child, it's pretty funny. That said, those are real concerns to think about. It's typical on Reddit to say that if a child had been exposed to the pictures, it would have been Bob's fault. But that's really not how the world works. Simply reporting the guys who were physically abusing campers would have been effective. Maybe it wouldn't be as funny, but costing someone their job certainly gets things done. Story 2. Since kindergarten, there was a kid that bullied me to no end. He would harass me, call me names, and toy with my weaker emotions. I was a small, sensitive child. So after 9 years of constant torture, we were put in the same math class in 8th grade. Needless to say, I wasn't happy with this. I was bullied on the bus and in class, till one day I decided I'd had enough. I decided to strategically purchase a second lunch once every few days. I had to save up my spare quarters. After I bought them, I stored them in my locker, which I didn't really use. After 2 months, those lunches had morphed into the most putrid mush on the planet. I had stored them in plastic bags to prevent the smell from escaping my locker, but that stuff still reeked. At this point, it was June, and the end of the year was coming, as was my revenge. My school has a large spiral-like staircase where there's a balcony overlooking the lower stairs. After my last math class of the year, we were released early to go to our buses. I rushed to my locker and grabbed the garbage bag full of nausea and prepared myself. Without a word, as I watched my bully go down the stairs, I dropped the bag off the balcony and immediately started off like I wasn't doing anything. I heard a very loud, "What the F?" and then ran to the bus via another stairway. Watching him have to sit on the bus covered in rotten food all the way home, which was 20 minutes away, was the best feeling ever. And I got off scot-free too. Too long didn't read, saved a bunch of rotten food for 2 months, then poured it on my bully, forcing him to sit in it for half an hour. Story 3. My wife hijacked, not hacked, Facebook when I left myself logged in. She posted a bunch of "I love Justin Bieber" pictures and stuff. The next time she left her Facebook logged in, I left her a subtle message not to F with me. Of course, she comes across my computer still logged in and decides to have a little more fun. Posts something else about how I supposedly have a strong affection for the Biebs. Bad move. The next day, I found her account still logged in. I changed her relationship status to single. I changed her employer to a well-known local strip club. I posted a photo of Chris Brown along with the caption, "Chris Brown is so hot, he can beat me anytime." I changed her interest to show her being interested in women and looking for a relationship. Like several gay, lesbian, and swinger groups, I made several other devious alterations to her profile and then changed her language preference to German to delay her ability to reverse the changes I made. Very interesting to see the number of coworkers and lesbians that suddenly came out of the woodwork and hit on my wife. Not to mention the messages asking, "What happened?" and "Are you guys okay?" The angry phone call I received while at work was amazing. She cursed me for what I did, followed by her admission that she deserved it, and it was beyond escalation. She proposed a truce, which I accepted, and I walked into my office the next day a hero, since everyone followed the feud. Too long didn't read, turned my wife into a single lesbian swinger stripper who has a Chris Brown fetish. Her reaction? Well done. No retaliation. It's been a long time since I've pointed something like this out on this channel, but whenever a story ends with everybody applauding the OP, I just instantly find myself assuming it never really happened. Which is ironic because this story's more plausible than a lot of the ones in this thread. This just sounds like a husband and wife pranking each other a little bit. It's not really that deep. You think he'd just learn to sign out every once in a while, but that's beside the point. The biggest thing I have trouble believing is just that this guy made light of domestic abuse and everyone supposedly loved it. I have to imagine you'd get at least a little bit of backlash for that, so it's suspicious that we never hear about it. Doesn't mean this didn't happen, but I'm going to go out on a limb and suppose it's at least been misrepresented. But with a prompt like this one, we should probably prepare ourselves for a lot of that. Story 4. When I was 11, I got a job as a paper runner for a junk paper advertising agency, but I never got the chance to hand in the contract that they made me sign, which pretty much said I was getting paid $16 a week for hours and hours of work, including retrieving the junk mail, sorting them together, and delivering to hundreds of mailboxes. Also, if I was hit by a car, the company, didn't take the blame. I worked for this company for about a month, working my little butt off, delivering papers awesomely, letterbox by letterbox, eagerly waiting for my $72 pay at the end of the month. Until I realized I never got it. So I got my mom to call the company and ask them, why did they refuse to pay me? They say it's because I never gave them the contract, and said they refused to pay for what I have already done once I handed the contract in. I was 11, and I was still doing hours and hours of work already, so I got really ticked off and just stopped delivering the papers. For months. The place where they would leave the papers for me stacked up to about neck-high in undelivered junk mail when they finally rang my mom to yell at her, saying we'd have to pay a $2,000 fine because of the damage. I got the phone off her because I said, I didn't sign any contract, I never worked for you, and hung up. Felt good. Too long didn't read. Junk mail company screwed over 11-year-old me. I screwed them over a course of months out of advertising. Story 5. When I was in high school, I had a friend who was a grade higher than me. We lived down the block from each other. One day at school, I saw him in the hallway and asked him a question about soccer, which we both played. He looked at me and said, "Do I know you?" and walked off. I blew it off, and when I got home, I went over to his house to talk to him about it. He said, "Sorry, but you're a junior and I'm a senior. I have standards." I hated him for this comment. I spent a good 2 months hashing out my plan for revenge. I figured out that his mom and dad love their lawn and manicure it every 2 to 3 days. I found out about his only child insecurity. He hated lawn work. One Friday night, I found a Jewish deli that made fresh dough for bagels. They throw out the rest of the dough from the bag at the end of the night. At midnight, I grabbed a trash bag of this dough and headed to my friend's house. For the next 5 minutes, I threw little chunks of dough all over his lawn. By the way, this was in the full summer heat in the southern U.S. The next day, when the sun rose, those little nuggets of dough started to rise like freaking hybrid mushrooms all over his lawn, and they stuck to the lawn like concrete. His mother and father came out to go to work and were horrified. They blamed their son and his senior classmates for it, and he spent the entire weekend scraping that dough up. And what if they hadn't? Something kids don't realize when they do things like egg or TP a schoolmate's house is that they're punishing the parents for something they had nothing to do with. That could have easily ruined their lawn, a lawn they cared about far more than he did. But more importantly, the reasoning behind the revenge kind of makes this OP sound like the villain of the story. Just because someone lives near you or plays the same sports as you doesn't make you friends. Sure, you could say the kid was overly dismissive, but if he doesn't want to be friends with someone from the grade below him, that's ultimately his business. People who hate the world for not being friends with them tend to prove through their actions that they don't actually deserve much in the way of friends. This OP seems like a perfect example of that. Story 6. I was living with a friend of mine and a girl I didn't know too well. We became friends and started hanging out a bunch. I ended up getting into a car accident on the freeway and had to move home. It took me a few days to get back to pack, and when I did, most of my stuff was missing. I was furious and upset about it. The girl told me my friend had a few people over and that maybe they had taken the stuff. Well, I went to grab some boxes and pack some more while she was gone and went into her room to snoop. And sure enough, this girl had taken over half my closet and hid it in her room, including my CDs, old antique perfume bottles my grandma had given me, down to socks and bras. What the F? So anyway, I was livid, packed all my stuff, and took all my stuff out of her room that she was trying to steal, then went back with some black garbage bags and took all of her clothes she had hanging up and then anything else I could find. Took it all to the middle of nowhere and lit it on fire. She called me frantically and said she was missing all her stuff, and I told her the people that took my stuff must have taken hers too. Once she knew she had been caught, she threatened me and told me she was going to call the cops. I told her to go ahead. They wouldn't have found anything anyway. Story 7. Nerd Revenge. I had a roommate in college who thought it was the greatest fun in the world to hack into our personal computers, even though none of us made any attempts to protect them from anyone else in the house. He would leave stupid messages on our desktops and change our backgrounds, and it just got annoying after a while. One day, I was bored and fed up and decided to return the favor. This was back when PC ISA cards all needed their IRQ set up by flipping jumpers on the cards. One of the most common results of an IRQ conflict in a sound card was that the first sound you played after boot would fill only a small buffer, 4,096 bytes more or less, and loop it forever until you rebooted, fiddled with the IRQ jumpers, and tried again. My roommate had gone through this procedure several times that week, trying to install a new video card without IRQ conflicts. So, in revenge, I hacked into his computer and found his startup sound file. I took the first tiny snippet, looped it in a new file that lasted about 10 minutes, and copied it back to his computer. When he booted his computer up, it sounded exactly like he had an IRQ conflict on his sound card, and he spent the next 3 days tearing his PC to bits and putting it back together again to find the problem. He finally fixed it by reinstalling Windows and never suspected any foul play. Served him right. Honestly, the funniest thing about this is just that it sounds like the roommate was kind of annoying and didn't understand that his pranks were unwelcome, whereas the OP was legitimately angry about the whole thing. Honestly, I'd be annoyed with the guy too, and I definitely don't feel too bad for him. But if something like a changed background is making you mad enough to do all this, you might have 1 or 2 anger issues. Try meditation, or getting a new roommate. Or, since it's kind of hinted that literally nobody in the house was doing this, put a password on your computer. I mean, do you want a Facebook full of Justin Bieber pictures? because this is how you get a Facebook full of Justin Bieber pictures. Story 8. This happened to me 3 months after I graduated from high school. So there's these 2 girls that have always been bullying me since junior high. They would spread fake stories around, make me quit from being one of the school's club leaders, and basically just be the plastics, spreading hate so people won't hang out with me. But I never do anything about them because of many reasons. Anyway, these 2 girls love everything related to Japan. Both of them have always been dreaming of moving to Japan so they could eat thousands of pocky and get married to their dream Japanese men. But these 2 are too lazy to do something with their dreams. On the other hand, I too was fascinated with Japan as a whole country and was dreaming of studying there. So I worked my tail off so maybe I could get the chance to win a scholarship. And I did right in front of one of the girls. I was visiting my classmate's house with her and other friends to do something, and then while we got bored and decided to order something to eat, my dad called to tell me that the Japanese government had been trying to call me. But apparently they can't contact my number, so I have to call them back. And after I called, I found out that I won the 3-year scholarship program to Japan. The look on her face was unforgettable. I could taste the sweetness of revenge. I almost got diabetes. See, this is the best kind of revenge. I knew going in that most of these stories were going to be either pranks or just straight-up crimes committed by the sociopaths that seem to account for roughly 3/4 of Reddit's user base, but people aren't being tacky when they tell you that the best way to get revenge on people is to simply continue living your best life. That only worked in this case because the school bullies and their target just all happened to be weebs. But even if these other girls had no attraction to Japan whatsoever, getting a 3-year scholarship to a foreign country and the chance to go on an adventure while they're left behind is still a way sweeter form of revenge than lighting someone's clothes on fire or making up stories about a junk mail agency that supposedly failed to notice months' worth of undelivered mail had been building up. Focusing on yourself is not only the best way to avoid further retribution, but it also leads to the most fulfilling end results you could hope for. Story 9. So when I was at primary school, we had a huge Pokemon card fad. This blockhead kid, let's call him Adolf, stole my freaking Pokemon cards. I was crying at home for ages, and eventually my dad got out of me what had happened. First off, my dad phoned Adolf's house phone, wishing to speak to his mother. Adolf pretended to be his mom and assured my dad that all would be sorted out. Not to be outwitted by a 9-year-old, my dad realized this and complained to the school. Adolf denied all accusations and got away with it. In reaction to the drama, the school banned Pokemon cards. So now everyone hates me because they blame my snitching on getting Pokemon banned. I'm down all my Pokemon cards. I vowed to myself that I'd take revenge on Adolf. I saved up my pocket money for months and eventually got a decent collection of Pokemon cards, including a Blastoise. I then started an underground Pokemon card club in the boys' toilet of the school during morning and lunch break. The teachers never found out about it, but every now and then a kid would be caught and have his cards confiscated. I was the leader of this group, and everyone looked up to me. I would always make everyone chip in a few cards for anyone who had theirs confiscated. Adolf was forever banned from partaking in the underground Poke Club. He spent like a year playing by himself. The line, Adolf pretended to be his mom, is going to give me dreams tonight that I did not ask for. In any case, I'm not sure Adolf playing with himself in the boys' room is really revenge so much as just a natural part of growing up. On an unrelated note, I never really played with Pokemon cards very much because I had a social life, so I'm admittedly not too sure what Blastoise has anything to do with this story. It just sounds like a somewhat inflated story of a kid who everyone supposedly looked up to because he turned to some guys and said, "Hey, you know how we aren't supposed to play Pokemon? Let's just do it anyway." And having gone to multiple schools that ban stupid things, I find it hard to believe this OP was the first one to have that idea. Rebellion is pretty instantaneous when schools implement rules like this. But even if OP was the first one, is that something to brag about? I know I said the best revenge is to live your best life, but playing Pokemon outside the stall while Billy's in there pinching one off isn't what I meant. You could have at least played Pogs or Magic the Gathering like the cool kids do. Story 10. Fast revenge is good revenge. When we were kids, my sister pushed a whole raw egg into my mouth while we were fighting. I threw up and pushed that into her mouth. Justice done. I agree. Swift, over-the-top justice is the most satisfying and also teaches people not to mess with you. When I was a kid, my friend's sister kept tripping me every time I'd walk by her in her house. She was a few years older than me, and would always give this awful laugh every time. After this happened a good 4 times, I saw her sitting there and knew it was coming. Walked past, pretending not to see her sitting there. She stuck her foot out as usual. I bring my foot down as hard as I can and stomp the crap out of her foot. Homegirl didn't trip me ever again. Another time, I was hanging out with these 2 Canadian guys while overseas, and when we got to Amsterdam, they started giving me grief. They started hitting the tops of my beer with theirs so it would foam up and go everywhere. After a couple of times, I pretended to forget about it. One of them went for a smash while sitting next to me. I dodged with my beer and hit him nice and hard. Beer exploded all over him. Mission accomplished. Story 11. One summer, I took an Algebra 2 class. During break, me and a classmate played blackjack for cash. One day I was down about $20 and I paid up. The very next day we played again, but I won my money back and then some. My classmates won't pay up. I was furious, so I was plotting revenge. I would always have a pack of gum on me, and that jerk would always ask for a piece. I went to the drugstore after class and I purchased a pack of Clarettes and a pack of Phenamint gum, laxative gum, because the packaging looked the same. I have no idea why that company invented a laxative gum, but I thank the Lord some crazy genius did. The next morning, I walked into class snapping gum. Sure enough, he took the bait. He asked me for some gum, and I gave him 2 pieces. He chewed that gum for about an hour. That butthole also stole a fruit pie from another kid's lunch bag right next to him while still chewing on that gum. He spit out the gum, ripped open the fruit pie, and inhaled it. He leapt up from his seat like frogs in a dynamite pond and ran out of the class, never to return. Too long didn't read. Kid wouldn't pay a gambling debt. I gave him laxative gum, and he shat himself. I can't even focus on the story here because I'm too busy questioning the logistics of a laxative gum. First of all, if it takes an hour to work, it's not a very good laxative. You can get more mileage out of a cup of Bustelo. Second, how long does the flavor last on a gum like that? If you go to the bathroom but the gum still has flavor left, does that mean you'll need to go to the bathroom again later? Because then it goes from not being strong enough to being entirely too strong. And how strong is the flavor anyway? I always have to chew 2 pieces of Orbit at a time because I find it underwhelming otherwise. Would that just destroy my body? I swear all I want for Christmas is a stocking full of this stuff so I can do some research. Story 12. I was a bouncer, still am, different bar, at a club in college. We went through an epidemic of girls getting roofied because they would A. leave a drink somewhere, B. take drinks from strangers, C. leave it with the friend zone party dude who took things a little personally. To me, none of those reasons matter. That's jacked up and very, very seriously angered me. Well, I found him. It took some detective work, aka bouncer not wearing a security shirt so as not to be noticed, and found that creep using a powder in a girl's drink while she was gone. We also just happened to have this quaint little back alley through a back door. I spent about 15 minutes befriending this man, or D-bag if you prefer, and told him if he really wanted to party, I had some blow in my car out back. I let him lead the way, and promptly face-slammed his head into a wall and knocked him out in the alley. Made sure his pill bottle was easy to find and left him there. Cops patrol the alley fairly regularly. I went back inside, made sure that the drink had been dumped. I'd called it on the radio before I started talking to him. Put on my actual security clothes and went back to work. Revenge not for me, but for all the girls that should know better but don't. So you caused him a bit of pain, then left him out in the open with absolutely no certainty that he'd pay for his repeated crimes. You had actual evidence to use against him, and you dumped it out instead of contacting the police. In fact, even if the police found his pill bottle, they'd have absolutely no proof of him using it for anything. They'd have more evidence against you for assaults than they would against him for anything. But it doesn't matter because the cops didn't find him. If the cops had found a guy assaulted and unconscious in an alley behind a bar, you'd know about it because they'd be asking questions in the bar. That guy was probably just fine. He probably just kept doing the same thing at a different club. But by all means, pat yourself on the back like you're some kind of hero because you managed to sweep the dirt from one room to another. Story 13. In 4th grade, I was really into paper plane making. I even bought this book of all the world record-holding paper planes and would read it every day. I had just moved to America and wore very tacky clothing. so I was made fun of a lot. So one day, I copied the design of the paper plane that had a record for longest time in the air, 13.2 seconds or something, and threw it around the playground. It was in the air for 14 seconds. As I rushed to pick it up, though, this butthole 5th grader came out and stepped on it. Now, I was a tiny brown Indian kid, and he was a big hockey-playing 5th grader. But the anger took over me. I punched him in the face. He bled, and I ran away, thinking I was in trouble. He never mentioned it to anyone, though, and was always nice to me throughout middle school and high school. Too long didn't read, punched in respect. Story 14. Not me, but my older brother. Him and his friends were in high school, and there was some biscuit of a girl that would come and steal his friend's milkshake every day at lunch. This had been going on for a while, and it was ticking all of them off, so my brother came up with a way to get back at her. The next day would be like any other. His friend would get his lunch and milkshake, but they would cut up some X-Lax and stir it into the milkshake. The next day rolls around, and they proceed with the plan. Well, the girl comes in all her rudeness and takes the milkshake, laughing while she snatches his drink, and I think called him some rude name or something. The joke was on her, though, because she apparently didn't show up for school for the next 3 days. That girl was careless, and it was that day that her milkshake did not bring any boys to the yard. That last sentence is a lie. Story 15. My ex-wife kidnapped my daughter and went to Germany to live with her parents. After $50,000, 5 lawyers in 2 countries, the State Department, Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and lots of anxiety, I got my daughter back and had a freaking lethal court case against my ex. I chose to drop the charges because I didn't want my daughter to have a mom that was in jail. The county decided to drop the kidnapping charges if she agreed to return to the USA. I could have had anything I wanted from that court case, but all I asked for was 50-50 influence on custody, education, health, and life decisions. That's all I was asking for originally before my ex flipped her lid and left in the first place. Now my ex is married and has become super religious. I've taught my daughter to be accepting of others' beliefs, but to question everything. She thinks her mom is nuts. My daughter is freaking awesome. I understand not wanting your daughter to have a mother in jail, but all things considered, a 50-50 split sounds like she got off way too lightly. I believe in forgiveness, and it sounds like the mom proved that people really can change no matter how serious their mistakes may have been. But good gravy. This might be one of the very few stories in this thread where I was actually hoping for more serious revenge. Taking the high road is great, but letting someone get off completely scot-free when they've caused that much trouble is more or less the definition of enabling. Do I have this wrong? What would you do in this OP's shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Story 16. So, I just found out that my ex-girlfriend was only in a relationship with me because she wanted someone to go to prom with. I really liked her, so I dropped $240 on the night, tickets for us both, a tux, a nice corsage, and of course, some alcohol. Well, after I found out that she had just used me to go, a mutual friend of ours showed me a conversation they'd been having. Something along the lines of how many guys she's hooking up with, how they're super hot, chiseled abs, whatever. I was cheesed because she never once hooked up with me, and she wasn't even in a relationship with any of them. A couple months after all this, that same friend showed me a text from my ex saying, "Crud, I have gonorrhea." Posted it on Facebook and tagged her in it. Boom. Story 17. In 8th grade, the class witch spread a rumor that me and my best friend were lesbian for each other and that I'd contracted head lice from her pubes. Coincidentally, the kids we babysat at the time had a bad case of lice. In a moment of ingenuity, me and my friend swiped a few off their heads and put them in an envelope. The next morning in the homeroom, we saw the little C-word asleep on her desk and dumped the lice on her head when no one was looking. They made themselves at home, and she had lice for a month. 4 lovely weeks of giggling uncontrollably every time we saw her hopelessly scratching her infested head during class. Payback's a bummer. Remember that thing I said about Reddit being full of liars and sociopaths? Well, here you go. There's no way the school let this girl roam around with untreated lice for a month. Have you ever been to a school during a lice outbreak? They take that stuff seriously. If this story was true, OP would have been at risk of getting lice herself. And the irony is that if she did, it would have given her more credence to the other girls' rumors. Look, if you want to make up fake stories to get likes, go ahead. And if you're doing it because you're hoping it'll wind up on a YouTube channel, then, well, congratulations. But try to give your story even half as much logical consistency as the last season of Game of Thrones. That's literally all I'm asking for. Story 18. I was in a local mall's indoor car park and was about to leave. It was peak hour and traffic inside was crawling. I side parked and was at the end of the row, so all I had to do was drive forward to join the crawl in traffic. This guy that saw me getting into my car, obviously being a jerk, decided to stick really closely to the car in front so as to not let me join in. Bear in mind the traffic now was not moving. I started my engine and waited for the jerk to pass before joining in the queue. He then got so close that he rammed into the bumper of the car he was sticking closely to. That felt really good. I smirked to myself and reversed to exit the other way. Karma's a pain. Story 19. My little sister and I used to hang out with a bunch of rowdy kids when we were 7 and 9. An 11-year-old boy decided to throw a rock at my sister from across a major street and missed. She calmly picked up the rock and tossed it back, and it glanced off his head. My dad proceeded to try to give my sister a talking to about throwing rocks, but he was beaming with pride. Story 20. In high school, a friend of mine took my pizza and tossed it toppings down on the table. I surprised myself when I quickly scooped it up and planted it in his face. The minute-long walk to the nearest sink was amazing. Story 21. My friend forgot to tell me about the midterm, so when he left his Facebook on, I got his timeline. I'm going to assume that whatever this OP did on their friend's timeline is probably less egregious than the Chris Brown business. But what a weird reason to get revenge in the first place. People forget things. Case in point, midterms are pretty much always scheduled on the syllabus you get on the first day of class. It's weird to forget about it, but then get mad at your friend for forgetting about it. I know certain subreddits are inherently petty, but good grief. The people on this one need anger management. You don't even need to get actual therapy. Just watch the TV show by Charlie Sheen. Because I hate to say it, but some of these people make that guy look like the most well-adjusted man to ever walk the earth. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.